$200,000 for one night, he said. I couldn't believe it. For a moment, I just stood there, frozen, clutching the towel wrapped around me like it was the only thing keeping me grounded. My stepdad, Adam, was standing a few feet away from me in the hallway, his eyes locking onto mine with this disgusting mix of confidence and desperation. It was like he had rehearsed this moment. I was too shocked to speak at first, but when I did, it came out as a yell, a mixture of disbelief, anger, and pure disgust. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I screamed, backing away as fast as I could. "My name's Michelle. I'm 33 now, married, with 2 kids, and thankfully a far cry from the version of myself that was standing there in that hallway. At the time, I was 25, fresh out of college, and drowning in debt from student loans. I was working as an assistant professor at a community college, trying to make a name for myself, while scraping by on barely enough to pay my bills. My dad had moved to a different country when I was a teenager and had basically disappeared from our lives. My mom, Julia, had married Adam when I was 20, and let's just say, he wasn't the kind of person I'd have ever willingly chosen to have in my life. But my mom adored him, or at least she pretended to. He was 45 years old, wealthy, and provided her with everything she wanted. My mom was a bit older than him. It all started that afternoon. I was spending the weekend at my mom's house, something I rarely did because, honestly, being around her wasn't easy. My mom, Julia, and I never had a great relationship, especially after my twin sister died when we were kids. But with money being so tight, I figured staying with her for a couple of days would save me the cost of groceries, and maybe we could actually have a decent conversation for once. That day, I'd gone out for a jog. It was brutally hot, and by the time I got back, I was drenched in sweat. I saw a note on the kitchen counter saying that my mom was out visiting a friend and Adam had gone grocery shopping. Perfect. I thought I had the place to myself for a little bit, so I headed straight for the shower, not even bothering to grab clothes since I figured no one would be back for a couple of hours. After my shower, I wrapped myself in a towel and headed toward the bedroom where I'd left my clothes. It didn't even cross my mind that someone might have come back early. I mean, why would it? But as soon as I turned the corner, there he was, Adam, standing at the end of the hallway. My heart dropped. He wasn't supposed to be there, and the way he looked at me, it wasn't normal. At first, I thought maybe I'd startled him, or maybe he'd startled me. But then he smiled. Not a friendly stepdad kind of smile. This was something else entirely. Before I could say anything, he stepped closer. Too close. "You're beautiful, you know that," he said, his voice low, like he was testing the waters. I froze, not sure what to do or say. My brain was screaming at me to move, to get out of there, but my feet felt like they were stuck to the floor. Then he said it, the offer that made my stomach turn. $200,000 for one night, he said, like he was offering me a business deal. His tone was calm, almost casual, like this was something normal to say to your stepdaughter. That's when it hit me. He wasn't joking. He meant it. Every disgusting word. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. My mind was racing, but I couldn't form a single coherent thought. "What the hell did you just say?" I managed to choke out. My voice didn't even sound like my own. It was shaky, almost a whisper. Adam didn't flinch. He just kept looking at me with that disgusting smirk. "You heard me," he said, shrugging like it was no big deal. "Think about it, Michelle. 200 grand. You could pay off your loans, start fresh. No one would have to know." That's when the anger kicked in, boiling up so fast I could feel my hands trembling. "Are you insane?" I yelled, backing away from him. "What kind of person do you think I am?" He didn't move, didn't even look embarrassed. If anything, he seemed annoyed, like I was the one being unreasonable. "Calm down," he said, his voice still infuriatingly calm. "It's just an offer. You don't have to make a big deal out of it." A big deal? He was standing there trying to buy me and he had the audacity to tell me to calm down? My whole body was shaking, and I couldn't even look at him anymore. I turned and ran straight into my room, slamming the door behind me and locking it. Once the door was locked, I pressed my back against it, trying to steady my breathing. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. I felt trapped, not just in the room, but in the whole situation. What was I supposed to do? I wanted to scream, cry, throw something. But most of all, I wanted to be anywhere but there. The worst part was knowing I had no one to call. My mom? She'd never believe me. She never believed me about anything important. And this? She'd probably twist it into being my fault somehow, like she always did. I sat on the floor, hugging my knees, trying to figure out what to do. Minutes dragged by, each one stretching out endlessly as I sat there in silence. Through the thin walls, I could hear the low murmur of the TV. Adam had made himself comfortable in the living room, as if nothing had happened. The audacity of it made me feel sick. Then finally the sound of the front door opening broke the tension. I heard my mom's voice, light and casual, like it was just another normal evening. For a moment, relief washed over me. She was home, but almost instantly a wave of dread followed. What was I supposed to say? Would she even listen? My hands were clammy as I unlocked the door and stepped into the hallway. There she was, setting her purse down on the counter, while Adam leaned back on the couch like he didn't have a care in the world. My stomach churned, but I swallowed hard and found my voice. "Mom, I need to talk to you. Alone." She turned to look at me, her brow furrowing slightly. "What's wrong?" she asked, her tone more impatient than concerned. My eyes flicked to Adam, who was watching us like this was some kind of show. I hated how calm he looked, like he already knew how this would play out. I gestured toward the kitchen, trying to keep my voice steady. "Can we just talk in private?" My mom sighed but followed me into the kitchen. I could feel my hands trembling as I leaned against the counter, trying to find the right words. "Mom," I started, my voice cracking. Adam said something to me. Something disgusting. Her face shifted, but not in the way I'd hoped. Instead of concern, there was annoyance. "What are you talking about?" she asked sharply. I took a deep breath, feeling like I was about to step off a cliff. He offered me money, $200,000, to sleep with him. The words felt like acid coming out of my mouth. I expected shock, anger, something. But what I got instead made my heart drop. Her expression hardened, and she let out a bitter laugh. "Oh, for God's sake, Michelle, don't be ridiculous." I stared at her, dumbfounded. "I'm not lying," I said, my voice rising. He said it, not long ago, in the hallway. But she wasn't listening. She was already shaking her head, her lips curling into a sneer. "You're unbelievable," she said. "I should have known you'd pull something like this. Always looking for attention, always trying to cause problems." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own mother dismissing me like I was some troublemaker making up lies. I felt tears welling up, but I refused to let them fall. "I'm not lying," I repeated, louder this time, my voice shaking. She raised a hand to stop me, her expression cold and detached. "Enough, Michelle. Let's see what Adam has to say about this." She stormed back into the living room, and I followed, my heart pounding. Adam looked up from the couch as if we'd just interrupted his quiet evening. "Adam," my mom said sharply, her voice edged with anger. "Michelle just told me you said something completely inappropriate to her. She's claiming you offered her money for—" She hesitated, glancing at me with an icy glare. "For you know what?" She made a suggestive face, kind of embarrassed to say the words. Adam leaned back slightly, his expression shifting into one of exaggerated concern, like he was the one being wronged. "Julia, I don't know how to say this, but it's the opposite of what she's claiming," he said, shaking his head as if the mere suggestion was preposterous. "She came out of the bathroom in just a towel and, well, it felt like she was trying to get my attention." He glanced at me with a look of fake pity. "I didn't want to bring it up because I didn't want to upset you, but she's twisting the whole thing around now." My jaw dropped. "What?" I shouted, my voice breaking as I took a step forward. "That's not what happened, and you know it." But Adam kept his composure, holding his hands up in mock defense. "I swear, Julia, I was going to let it go because I didn't think it was worth causing trouble, but I can't just sit here and let her make these accusations." He sounded calm, even reasonable, and that made my blood boil. I turned to my mom, desperate for her to see through his lies, but the look on her face made my stomach sink. She wasn't looking at him. She was glaring at me. My mom didn't say anything at first, but her glare said it all. She believed him. Of course, she did. "Unbelievable," she muttered, shaking her head. "You come into my house, and this is how you act? How dare you, Michelle?" Her words hit me like a slap. I felt my face flush hot, my body trembling with frustration and anger. "You're seriously taking his side?" I yelled, my voice cracking. "He's lying, Mom. He's lying to your face." But she wasn't listening. She turned to Adam and placed a hand on his shoulder like he was the victim. "I'm so sorry you had to deal with this," she said, her tone dripping with sympathy. That was it. I couldn't take another second in that house. I turned and stormed toward the door, my hands shaking as I grabbed my bag. "You know what? Forget it," I said, my voice trembling. "Believe whatever you want, but I'm done." I didn't wait for her to respond. I just walked away, tears blurring my vision as I picked up what I had brought, walked towards the front door. I could barely breathe, the weight of betrayal and anger pressing down on my chest. As I reached the front door, I heard her voice behind me, cold and sharp. "I didn't expect much from you, Michelle, but I never thought you were a—" She started, but she couldn't finish the word. I spun around, my hand still gripping the door handle. "Don't you dare," I said, my voice low but shaking with anger. My eyes burned as I stared at her, feeling every ounce of the hurt and betrayal welling up inside me. "You want to believe him? Fine. But don't you ever call me that." She stood there, her arms crossed, her face hard, and for a second, I thought she might actually say it. But she didn't. Instead, she just turned away, dismissing me like I was nothing. I opened the door, stepped outside, and slammed it behind me as hard as I could. I could feel the tears starting to fall again, but I refused to let her see them. Not her, not Adam, not anyone in that house. I practically ran to my car, threw my bag into the passenger seat, and climbed in, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I drove aimlessly for a few minutes, the streets blurring through my tears. The anger and humiliation were too much to hold back. Finally, I pulled over to the side of the road, parked the car, and let it all out. My hands gripped the steering wheel as sobs racked my body, the weight of everything crashing down on me. After a while, I wiped my face with my sleeve, trying to steady my breathing, but the knot in my chest wouldn't go away. I needed to talk to someone, anyone, but I didn't know who to call. My mom was out of the question, and there was no way I'd go to anyone who might twist this into gossip. Then I thought of John. He was just a good friend back then, someone I trusted. I hesitated for a moment, feeling embarrassed about what had happened, but I needed to get it out of me before it consumed me. With trembling hands, I picked up my phone and dialed his number. It rang a few times before he answered, his voice calm and familiar. "Michelle? Everything okay?" he asked, immediately sensing something was off. That was all it took for the tears to start again. "John?" I said, my voice cracking. I need to talk to someone. Can I just tell you what happened?" I braced myself for his reaction, not knowing if he'd judge me or think I was overreacting. But I didn't care. I just needed to let it out. John and I weren't anything more than friends back then. Good friends, but nothing romantic. We'd met at the community college where I worked. He was one of those people who always seemed easy to talk to, the kind of guy who'd crack a joke at the right moment to lighten the mood or offer a listening ear when you needed one. Over the months, we'd grabbed coffee a few times, and I always felt comfortable around him. He never pushed, never judged. Just a good, solid friend. That's why, Even though I felt humiliated and raw, I dialed his number. He was one of the few people I trusted to listen without twisting things around or making me feel worse. As the phone rang, part of me worried I was dumping too much on him, but the moment he answered, I knew I'd made the right choice. His voice was calm and steady, a stark contrast to the chaos I was feeling. "Hey, Michelle," he said. "What's going on? You sound upset." John suggested we meet at a park nearby. I think he could tell from my voice that I needed to get out, to talk face to face with someone who wouldn't make me feel small. I drove there, still trying to collect myself, though my hands were trembling on the steering wheel. When I arrived, I spotted him sitting on a bench under one of the big oak trees, his usual easygoing expression replaced by one of quiet concern. As I approached, he stood up and gave me a small smile. "Hey," he said, his voice soft. "You okay?" I shook my head, biting my lip to keep from breaking down again. We sat on the bench, and for a moment I just stared at the ground, trying to find the words. Finally, I took a deep breath and told him everything, about Adam, his disgusting offer, and how my mom not only didn't believe me, but turned it all around on me. As the words spilled out, I felt a mix of anger and relief, like I was finally letting go of a weight I'd been carrying all night. When I finished, I looked up at John, half expecting him to have the same doubtful expression my mom had given me. Instead, his face was filled with quiet anger. Not at me, but at the situation, at Adam. "Michelle," he said firmly, his voice steady, "I believe you. Every word." Hearing those words felt like the ground beneath me had finally steadied, even if just for a moment. I let out a shaky breath, and tears welled up again, not from sadness this time, but from relief. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice barely audible. He shook his head, his jaw tightening. "You shouldn't have to deal with this. What he did, it's disgusting. And your mom? She should have had your back, no question." His words felt like a balm on an open wound. For the first time all day, I didn't feel completely alone. I took a deep breath, trying to gather my thoughts, but everything came pouring out before I could stop it. "You know, it's not just this," I said, my voice trembling. "My mom, she's always been cold with me, ever since Lily." I paused, swallowing hard. "Ever since my sister died. I was 7, and we were at the playground. She chased after a ball, ran into the street, and—" My words trailed off as the memory hit me like a wave. The screech of tires, the screams, it all came rushing back. John didn't say anything, just nodded, letting me get it out. "It was an accident," I continued, my voice cracking. "But it's like my mom never saw it that way. After that day, everything changed. She stopped looking at me the same, stopped hugging me, she just shut me out. And now, tonight, it's like she's blaming me all over again, like I'm the bad one, like I did something wrong. I don't know why I even thought she'd believe me." Tears rolled down my cheeks, and I quickly wiped them away, embarrassed by how much I was unraveling. The next few days were a blur of anger, hurt, and sleepless nights. I couldn't shake Adam's smug expression, the way he twisted everything to make me look like the villain. And my mom. The way she defended him without hesitation cut deeper than I expected. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized I couldn't just let this go. I couldn't let him get away with it, not when I knew the truth. I needed proof. Something my mom couldn't deny. Something that would finally force her to see him for what he was. The idea hit me one night as I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything in my head. My phone. I could use my phone to record him. It was simple, and I always had it on me. The thought made my pulse quicken. If I could get Adam to repeat what he said, or even hint at it, I'd finally have proof. Something my mom couldn't brush off or twist against me. I decided the best way to catch Adam off guard was to play along, to make him think I was reconsidering everything. It made my stomach turn just thinking about it, but I knew this was the only way to get him to admit the truth. That evening, I called him, keeping my voice steady, as if I was genuinely conflicted. Adam, I've been thinking about what happened the other day, I said, forcing a hesitant tone. Maybe we should meet somewhere quiet to talk. I feel like maybe we misunderstood each other. There was a pause on the other end, and I held my breath, waiting for his response. Finally, he said, "Well, I'm glad you're being reasonable about it, Michelle. Where do you want to meet?" His voice had that same smug undertone that made my skin crawl, but I stayed calm. "There's a park nearby," I suggested. "It's quiet, and we won't be interrupted." He agreed without hesitation, and I hung up, immediately opening the voice recorder app on my phone. I rehearsed what I'd say, trying to keep the anger in check. This was my chance to expose him, and I wasn't going to mess it up. As soon as I saw Adam walking toward the bench where I was waiting, I discreetly started the recording app on my phone, keeping it hidden in my jacket pocket. My hands were clammy, but I reminded myself to stay calm. I had to make this believable. I stood up as he approached, forcing a small, nervous smile. "Hey, Adam," I said, keeping my voice soft. "Thanks for meeting me. I've been thinking a lot about what happened, and I wanted to apologize if I misunderstood anything." He smiled, that same irritatingly smug expression he always wore when he thought he was in control. "I appreciate that, Michelle," he said, sitting down on the bench beside me. "I knew you'd come around eventually. Sometimes emotions get the better of us, you know?" I nodded, pretending to agree. "Yeah, maybe I overreacted. I mean, I was shocked, and I probably didn't handle things the way I should have." I paused, glancing at him. I need to understand. What did you mean when you said what you said? About the money?" His expression shifted slightly, like he was weighing how much to say. "Look," he began, leaning forward. "I only brought it up because I thought we had a certain understanding. You're a smart, beautiful woman, Michelle. I thought maybe you'd see the opportunity for what it was." I swallowed hard, keeping my voice steady. "But $200,000? That's a lot of money, Adam. Why would you even offer something like that? What were you expecting from me?" He chuckled lightly, shaking his head. "I wasn't expecting anything, really. I was just testing the waters, seeing if maybe you'd consider it. I mean, you're struggling, right? I thought it might help us both." I felt my stomach turn, but I kept my face neutral. "Help us both how?" I pressed, my voice quiet but steady. He smirked, leaning back on the bench. "Let's not play games, Michelle. You know exactly what I meant. I didn't think you'd make such a big deal out of it. It's not like anyone else had to know." I nodded slowly, letting the silence hang for a moment before speaking again. "So, you were serious? About the 200,000? He shrugged casually. "Of course I was. I don't say things I don't mean, Michelle. I figured you'd appreciate the gesture." Every word he said made my blood boil, but I stayed calm, knowing the recorder was picking up everything. I glanced at him one last time, my voice soft but firm. "Thanks for clearing that up, Adam. I needed to hear it from you." I forced myself to smile faintly, looking down at my hands as if I was embarrassed. "I mean, you're not wrong, Adam," I said hesitantly, my voice low. "I am struggling. Money's been tight, and with my loans, I've felt like I'm drowning most days." I glanced at him, catching the faint glimmer of excitement in his eyes as he shifted slightly closer. "You don't have to feel bad about that," he said, his tone softening in a way that almost sounded comforting, but I knew better. "You're a smart girl, Michelle. You've got options, and I'm offering you something that could change your life. It's not just about the money, it's about making things easier for both of us." I nodded slowly, pretending to mull it over. "It's just, I don't know. I've never thought about anything like this before. I mean, it's not like you're unattractive or anything," I added, forcing a nervous laugh as if I were embarrassed to admit it. "You're actually pretty good-looking, Adam." His smile widened, and he sat up straighter, clearly encouraged. "Well, thank you," he said, his voice taking on a more confident tone. See? It doesn't have to be awkward. I knew you'd understand eventually. This could be something good for both of us, Michelle. You just have to let yourself see it that way. I glanced at him again, feigning uncertainty. Maybe you're right. I just need some time to think about it, I said, standing up slowly. Can I let you know in a couple of days? I just need to wrap my head around everything. Of course, he said, smiling broadly now. Take all the time you need. I'm glad we could talk this through. I nodded, offering him a weak smile before turning and walking away, my phone still recording in my pocket. My hands were trembling, but not from nervousness anymore. I had him. Every disgusting word was captured, and I knew exactly what I was going to do next. 2 days later, I called Adam. My stomach churned as I dialed his number, but I reminded myself that this was all part of the plan. He picked up on the second ring, sounding eager like he'd been waiting for this call. Michelle, he said smoothly. I was hoping to hear from you. Have you had time to think? I hesitated for effect, then replied, Yeah, I've been thinking. I'm ready to talk more about it. But I'd like to meet somewhere private, somewhere out of the way. I heard the excitement in his voice as he responded, Of course, tell me where and when. I'd already decided on the location, a fancy hotel downtown that Adam and my mom like to brag about. The Grand Regent, I said. Let's meet in the lobby tonight around 8. We can figure out the details there. He didn't hesitate, agreeing immediately. Perfect, he said. I'll see you tonight. When I hung up, I sat back and took a deep breath. Everything was in place. My phone was fully charged, and I'd already set up the recorder app to start with one tap. Tonight, Adam would think he'd won, but this time I wasn't walking away empty-handed. At 7:50, I called Adam, keeping my voice calm but a little rushed. Hey, I'm running a bit late, I told him. Traffic's a nightmare. Why don't you go ahead and wait for me in a suite? I'll meet you there as soon as I can. He didn't hesitate, clearly eager. No problem, Michelle. I'll let the reception staff know about you. After hanging up, I drove straight to my mom's house, gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. When she opened the door, her face immediately twisted with suspicion. What do you want? She asked, her tone sharp. I didn't waste time. Mom, you're coming with me, I said firmly. She started to argue, but I cut her off, my voice steady but full of emotion. If you don't come with me right now, I swear you'll never see me again. Not a call, not a visit, nothing. This is your one chance. Her eyes widened, and after a tense moment, she grabbed her purse and followed me to the car. When we arrived at the hotel, my heart was pounding, but I kept my composure. My mom sat stiffly in the passenger seat, her arms crossed, not saying a word. I parked the car and led her through the grand entrance of the hotel. The air smelled of polished wood and fresh flowers, the kind of luxury Adam and my mom loved to flaunt. I walked straight to the reception desk, keeping my voice calm but firm. Hi, someone's waiting for me, but I don't know the room number. They said I should give you my name here. I told the receptionist my name. She nodded, typing quickly on her computer before picking up the phone to confirm. Yes, room 704, 7th floor. I turned to my mom, holding out the card. Let's go, I said, my voice steady. She didn't respond, but followed me into the elevator. The ride up felt like an eternity. When we reached the room, I took a deep breath before sliding the card into the door. The lock clicked and I pushed it open. Adam was sitting in an armchair, looking far too comfortable. He looked up, expecting me to be alone, but his expression quickly changed when he saw my mom standing behind me. His smile faltered, and he shot up from the chair. What's going on? He asked, his voice sharper than usual, his confidence suddenly wavering. I stepped into the room, my mom trailing behind me. Adam's face was a mix of confusion and panic as he glanced between us. What's going on, Michelle? He demanded, trying to keep his voice steady, but the cracks were already showing. I pulled out my phone, holding it tightly in my hand. I thought it was time we cleared up that little misunderstanding, Adam, I said, my voice cold. You remember, don't you? The conversation we had at the park 2 days ago? His eyes darted to my mom, then back to me. Michelle, I don't know what you're talking about, he said quickly, his usual smugness replaced by a nervous edge. I think you're making a big mistake here. I smiled faintly, my hand trembling slightly as I tapped the play button on my phone. His voice filled the room, crystal clear. Every disgusting word he'd said at the park played back, his offers, his excuses, and, worst of all, his casual admission that he meant every word. My mom's face paled as the recording continued. She froze, her eyes wide as she stared at Adam. When the recording finished, I turned to my mom, my voice steady but full of emotion. That's the man you defended, the one you chose to believe over me. Now tell me, Mom, am I still the liar here? Adam started stammering, his face red with panic. Julia, you know this is all being twisted. She set me up, he blurted, his voice rising in desperation. You can't believe this. She's just trying to turn you against me. But my mom didn't look at him. Her gaze stayed fixed on me, her mouth slightly open as if she couldn't find the words. Finally, she whispered, Is this real, Michelle? Her voice was barely audible, but there was no mistaking the crack in it. My mom and I didn't talk much on the drive home, but something shifted. For the first time in my life, I felt like she truly saw me. A week later, she filed for divorce, and Adam was out of our lives for good. She never saw him again, and neither did I. In the weeks that followed, my mom and I started talking more, and slowly, our relationship began to heal. She apologized, truly apologized, for not believing me, and for the way she had treated me over the years. It wasn't an instant fix, but it was a start. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't just the shadow of the daughter she'd lost. I was her daughter too, and she wanted me in her life. Looking back, that night changed everything. It forced me to stand up for myself in a way I never had before. It was hard, painful, and messy, but it also gave me my voice and my life back. My mom treats me with respect now, and though we'll never be perfect, we've found a way to move forward. As for me, going through all of that brought me closer to John. He was there for me through every step, checking in, supporting me, and never once doubting me. What started as a friendship grew into something more over time. By the time I turned 30, we were married, and now with Bobby and Emma, I have the family I always dreamed of. A family built on trust and love, something I once thought I'd never have.
Dee is retiring, so to celebrate, I'm taking our parents to Germany today. I'm using your platinum card for the trip and plan to have a great time with it. This is going to be an amazing trip. What are you talking about? Exactly what I said. No, I don't understand what you mean by exactly what I said. Please explain. We need to hurry. Okay, we'll go soon. Sorry, I have to leave now. I'll hear the details when I get back. Just one thing. Does the credit card work? Huh? My unemployed husband Jeremy took my credit card to take our parents on a trip. I've tolerated a lot from Jeremy, but this seems like the perfect chance to teach him a lesson. When he comes back from the trip, he'll have some big regrets. I'm Maria, a 35-year-old company employee. After graduating from a top university, I got a job at a major company and have been doing well there. Even though I'm only 35, I earn enough to support Jeremy, who doesn't work, and a child if we had one. But we don't have kids yet, though we're thinking about it soon. With a good job and income, I should be happy in my married life, but I'm not. The idea of having a child is just a possibility, but Jeremy not working is real. I'm not hungry for dinner because I ate snacks. That's fine, but what about your job search? I didn't go for an interview today. I just stayed home looking at job websites. Jeremy quit his job a year ago and has been job hunting since. Actually, he's been working part-time but doesn't stay in any job for long. He starts a job, quits soon after, takes a break, and then looks for another part-time job. You're looking at part-time jobs again, aren't you? I'm looking at both full-time and part-time. Why don't you stop looking for part-time jobs and focus on finding a full-time position? I know, but everything has its own timing. I wish Jeremy would find a steady job, but he can't be pushed too hard. He quit his last job because he had a conflict with his boss over work policies. That boss was known for being difficult. Jeremy stood up to him as the office representative with support from his colleagues. But when the situation got worse, his colleagues sided with the boss, not Jeremy. Because of that, Jeremy lost the boss's approval, felt betrayed by his colleagues, and found it hard to stay, so he left the company. Jeremy, dinner's ready. Can you bring it here? After quitting his job, Jeremy became reclusive and stayed in his room. After about 3 weeks, he started coming out and helping with household chores. All the dishes, really? Thanks. Then it's all yours. Yeah, I've got nothing but time, Jeremy said with a smile, but it didn't seem very genuine. After another 3 weeks, he started looking for jobs again. I have an interview today. Is it your top choice? Yeah, I'm going to get this job and start over. I'm rooting for you. Do your best. A month after quitting, Jeremy started job hunting seriously, but after another month, he still hadn't found a job. Why am I always getting rejected? Damn it, it's all my old company's fault. Don't get frustrated. You'll find something good. Of course I'm frustrated. I didn't do anything wrong. Jeremy might not be entirely blameless, but what happened at his last job wasn't completely his fault either. Still, quitting because of interpersonal issues doesn't look good to potential employers. It feels like I can't do anything right anymore. That's not true. You have an interview tomorrow. Let's work on your resume. It's pointless. I'm not going tomorrow. The constant rejections wore Jeremy down, but after a while he became defiant. One day, I came home to find torn-up resumes on the living room floor. Knowing the interview didn't go well, I chose my words carefully. Can you throw that trash in the bin? I'm done. Done with what? Job hunting. We can live on your income, right? I don't need to work. True, we could live on my income alone. Some people don't work and do a great job as full-time homemakers, but that's not Jeremy's situation. He's just avoiding dealing with the tough realities. I understand his reluctance after the bad experience at his last job and the unsuccessful job hunt, but we need to face this issue directly. I decided to be patient with Jeremy for now. Jeremy, you still haven't found a job. What's your plan? I've worked hard before. This is just an extended break. I'm not just resting. I'm studying for the future. That's good to hear. Since Jeremy quit his job, his parents, Linda and Brandon, started visiting us more often. They were probably worried about him. Hearing that Jeremy was preparing for his next job seemed to ease their concerns, but it was a lie. The beer will run out today. Can you pick some up on your way home? It's running out again. You drink too much. Try to cut down a bit. Fine, I won't ask you again. I'll buy it myself. Jeremy wasn't studying or job hunting. Instead, he spent his days watching TV and drinking beer. He probably didn't want others to know he was unemployed. I didn't want to hurt Jeremy by telling my in-laws the truth, so I decided to keep quiet about his excuses. But after over 5 months without job hunting, I decided it was time to address it. Jeremy, maybe it's time to start job hunting. You seem more settled now. What? It's been less than half a year since the problems at my last job. You want me to work again so soon after that? I just think the break has been a bit long. Stop nagging. You don't understand my situation because your job is going well. I have my own struggles, you know. Everyone has work problems and relationship issues. We all try to solve them. Let's work through this together. I get it. I'll look for a job. Jeremy walked out in the middle of our conversation. It seemed my words had hurt him, but him agreeing to look for a job felt like a positive step. I decided to wait until he was in a better mood to apologize. I got a job because of your nagging. That's great. Where? At a nearby supermarket. So, you'll need to learn and work hard, right? It's just part-time. No need to work too hard. Part-time or not, a job is a job. Is that a problem? I wanted to say something to Jeremy, but maybe starting a little work could help him get back on track. I decided to observe and see how it goes. I'm home. Jeremy, you're back. How's the job? I quit the supermarket part-time job. Why? It hasn't been that long. A college student there was being bossy, telling me to always put the vegetable boxes at the bottom in storage. It felt like harassment. That student was probably just showing you how to do the job. In many workplaces, even a college student can be a senior. Jeremy kept finding new jobs but couldn't stick with any of them. It's been a year, and he still hasn't managed to keep a job for long. Jeremy, what job are you doing now? I'm working part-time at a pub now. I've never worked in food and beverage before, but it's interesting. I think I've finally found my calling. Really? That's great, but isn't the pay from a part-time restaurant job kind of low? That's fine. I'm currently apprenticing and aiming to go independent. So you plan to own your own place someday? Exactly. The income is small now, but I'm working hard for that goal. Then take this. Treat yourself to something nice for once. Jeremy continued to put on a good front in front of his parents, but it was all lies. He quit the pub job just 4 days after this conversation and even took an allowance from his parents. I couldn't help but feel disappointed in my husband, so I decided it was time to be firmer. Hey Jeremy, we need to talk later. I'm at a good part in the movie. You can pause it. I took the remote control from the table, paused the movie, and started the conversation. It's just pressing pause at a crucial moment. What's up? Jeremy, you're 38, right? That's a prime working age. Don't you think about the future? Spending all day at home drinking and watching TV isn't a plan. The future? There are plenty of 38-year-olds who aren't working. Many people enjoy life without a job. True, but those people usually have something else they're passionate about. Do you have anything like that? Yeah. I know you're upset about me not working. I'll look for another part-time job. Jeremy seemed set on sticking with part-time work. Given his reasons for leaving previous jobs and his struggles with job hunting, I had tried to be gentle, but it was time for him to get serious. I needed to be stricter. One day at work, I got a text from Jeremy. Dad's retiring, so we're going to Germany to celebrate starting today. I'm borrowing your platinum card to splurge on the trip. I panicked and called him right away. What do you mean, a trip? Exactly what I said. I don't understand. Please explain. There are so many problems here. It's okay to celebrate Brandon's retirement, but he should have asked me before using my money and borrowing the credit card. It feels like stealing. And why am I paying for a trip to Germany that I'm not even going on? Jeremy was probably bragging to his parents, claiming the money was from his savings. The thought of it infuriated me, but one thing Jeremy said caught my attention. You mentioned borrowing a credit card. The one for our house? Yeah. Why do I have a platinum card? Some people think you need a high income for it, but that's not true. Your credit history, stable income, and other factors matter, and it's achievable even in your 40s. The annual fee is high, but I use it for the benefits and points. However, that credit card is in my wallet. So you took the credit card from home? Yeah, so I'm counting on you for the payment. Jeremy was excited about his trip to Germany and spoke to me in a provocative tone. I had been patient with him for a long time, but this seemed like a good opportunity to address the situation. Jeremy thought he was being clever by taking my credit card and acting all cheerful, but he was in for a surprise. What are you doing? We need to go. Got it. I'm coming. Sorry, I need to move on now. I'll hear the details when I get back. Just one more thing. The credit card you took won't work. What? That can't be right. It's in Maria's name, and the expiry date is this month. It's short, but it shouldn't be a problem. You're lying, right? Maria, you're lying to stop me from using the card, aren't you? Yes, it expires this month. That's why I've already received a new credit card. What does that mean? So, I have 2 credit cards right now. When a new one is activated, the old one sometimes stops working. I've already started using the new card, so the one you took won't work. You're kidding, right? You think I'm lying? If you don't believe me, I can send you the link to the credit card website, or you could just try using the card yourself. It would be interesting to see you try to pay with a card that doesn't work. This credit card really won't work. Hey, hurry up. I hear his parents calling him in the background, but Jeremy, realizing the card won't work, seems too flustered to pay them any attention. What should I do? I told them I'd pay for everything except the round-trip travel. Oh, so they covered the flight? Yes. Dad felt bad about having all the trip costs covered. What should I do? I'm about to take a cab, and I don't even have money for that. That's not my problem. You said you'd pay for everything except the flight. Using my credit card in the first place was wrong. Pay with your own money. How can I? I don't have any money. Exactly. Jeremy, you haven't been working seriously. It's your fault for trying to look good by taking your parents on a trip without having the money. I'm at work, so I have to hang up now. I just wanted to tell you about the credit card. Wait, I hung up and went back to work. Jeremy, unable to pay for even the cab, would have to come clean to his parents. That night, After finishing work, I got a call from Laura. I heard from Jeremy that he tried to use your credit card and lied about working. I'm sorry for the trouble. No need to apologize, Laura. I'm sorry about the credit card issues. Are you okay with the money? We'll cover the trip's costs when we get back. I'll make sure Jeremy apologizes and finds a job right away. I'm sorry, Laura, but I'm considering divorcing Jeremy. Divorce because of this? It's part of it, but Jeremy has been taking money from me for a while. What? I stopped giving Jeremy money to curb his drinking. He started a part-time job and bought his own alcohol, but the salary wasn't enough for daily drinking. Jeremy began stealing money from my wallet to buy alcohol. Over the year, he repeatedly took amounts ranging from $7 to $70, which added up to a significant sum. I had been strict, hoping he'd change, but when he stole my credit card for his trip, it was clear he had no intention of improving. I respect your decision. Should I tell Jeremy about the divorce? Could you just tell him I want a divorce? We'll discuss the details when he gets home. About an hour later, the next morning after my call with Laura, Jeremy called. He must have heard about the divorce from her, but I had asked her to wait until he was back to discuss it. Too exhausted to deal with it, I decided not to answer. The next morning, after returning from work, I found Jeremy at home. He had cut his trip short. I'll work properly now. Please don't leave me, he pleaded as I entered the living room. Seeing Jeremy, he immediately apologized. His regrets seemed sincere but came too late. He had a whole year to change and still asked for another chance. I had warned him repeatedly, but he squandered every opportunity. I'm not going to give Jeremy another chance because he gave up on me. My mind is made up. Can you leave? Please don't say that. If you don't leave, should I call someone to help you pack your things? I'll move out only if you can afford the rent here. Jeremy fell silent. He didn't even have the money for next month's rent, let alone any income. My words and the reality of the impending divorce made him realize the severity of his situation. With nothing to take, Jeremy seemed to be leaving the house, probably heading to his parents' place. I considered asking if he had money for transportation, but Jeremy isn't a child. He should manage his own affairs, money or not. I watched him leave, feeling a mix of sadness and resolve. After leaving, Jeremy went to his parents' house. Later, I received a call from Linda. My parents-in-law let Jeremy stay for one night, but then asked him to leave the next day. They were worried he might become too reliant on them if he stayed. They wanted to create a situation where he had to fend for himself. It must have been tough for them to send their son away, but they felt it was necessary for his recovery. Kicked out from his parents' home, Jeremy came back to our house, pleading with me. Please help me. I've got nowhere to go and no money. That's the result of your own actions. You need to handle it yourself. Everyone faces hardships. Sometimes it's necessary to ask for help, but all you've done in the past year is abandon your responsibilities and do as you please. I didn't let Jeremy into the house and turned him away from the doorstep. The divorce went through eventually. Despite his reluctance, with the support of his parents, it happened faster than expected. I don't know what happened to Jeremy after we split. He's probably still jumping from job to job and making excuses for himself. I used to think I'd feel lonely without Jeremy, but I was surprised to find that I didn't feel lonely at all. Instead, I felt a weight lifted off my shoulders. Living with Jeremy had been incredibly stressful. His attitude and constant need for reassurance kept me on edge. I was always walking on eggshells, afraid of saying something that might upset him. Now, without him around, I don't have to worry about that anymore. My life has become much more comfortable. I hadn't realized how much of a burden our relationship had been. I was constantly trying to support him both emotionally and financially, and it drained me. Now I can focus on myself and my own well-being. I'm relieved that I didn't let Jeremy drag me down with him. I was always trying to help him, hoping he would change, but it never happened. Letting go of that responsibility has been freeing. I no longer have to cater to anyone else's needs or deal with anyone else's problems. I can finally live my life on my own terms without having to accommodate anyone else. It's a fresh start, and I'm embracing it fully. I have more time for myself, more energy to pursue my own interests, and a clearer mind to think about my future. I'm grateful for this new chapter in my life, free from the stress and worry that Jeremy brought into it.
I was planning a trip with my in-laws and decided to call my son, Anthony, to see if he had any plans. I'm going to practice, he said. You all should go and have fun. Isn't this trip a bit unusual? Are you okay, Mom? Anthony asked. I'll manage. I'll bring you back a souvenir. Work hard at your practice, I replied. My son, Anson, has always loved running marathons, just like me. He even got a college scholarship for it. Even though his college is nearby, he lives in the dorms to save commuting time and only comes home during long holidays. I knew he couldn't join us on the trip, but I wanted to ask anyway. His answer was just what I expected. My name is Flora. I'm 46 years old and work full-time. My husband, Steve, is 4 years older than me and used to be my boss. He's a capable man, and I respect him. After we got married and had our son, we were a happy family. But over time, our relationship started having problems. The main reason was my husband's parents, especially his mom, who didn't like me from the beginning and often bullied me. At first, Steve defended me because we lived far from his parents, so we didn't see them often. But when Anson wanted to attend a high school near my mom's house because of his love for marathoning, things changed. I was the one who got him into running since I used to run marathons and still do sometimes. I was happy he enjoyed running like me, so I convinced Steve to move closer to the high school Anson wanted to attend. Steve applied for a transfer at work so we could move, and Anson got into a good university because of his high school, so it worked out well. The day before our trip, Steve said, "Go get the rental car tomorrow morning and pick up my parents on your way back." I was confused and asked, "Why am I the one renting the car? What are you going to do?" "I'm exhausted from work, so I'll sleep until the last minute. Once you pick up my parents, come back and I'll drive from there. It's on the way to where we're going anyway," Steve explained. I understood his reasoning, but I was also very tired. Even though we both worked similar hours, I did all the house chores. When I thought about it, we used to share chores equally. But since moving closer to his parents, they started visiting often, and the balance shifted. Whenever his mom saw Steve doing chores, she strongly disapproved. Housework is the wife's job. The breadwinner shouldn't do it. Isn't that right, Flora? Steve's mom would say, giving me a stern look, and I would nod in agreement. This kept happening until Steve stopped doing any chores at all. While it was partly Steve's fault, I felt his mom influenced him a lot. Steve even started repeating what his mom would say, agreeing with her views. I am sometimes the breadwinner in our family, but it felt pointless to try to fix things, and I didn't have the energy to even try. Steve had changed a lot in the past few years. His work performance seemed to be getting worse, and he often took out his frustrations on me. I realized that arguing back only caused more problems, so I decided to just accept the situation. It seemed like the least stressful way to live. I thought about divorce sometimes, but I worried it might hurt our son's chances of getting into college if we became a single-parent family. So I put that idea aside. Instead, I started thinking of my husband more like a pet than a person, which surprisingly made me feel less stressed. Eventually, I realized that getting a divorce wasn't worth the effort, and that's how I ended up where I am today. I agreed to this trip because it was to a resort I really loved. I knew I could have a great time even if I ended up doing things alone. Honestly, I was ready to do separate activities from my in-laws and husband if necessary. Maybe they invited me mainly to drive, but since both my husband and father-in-law could drive, I figured it would be fine. I played along with the idea that our spoiled dog was being demanding again. My husband asked me to pick up the rental car, so I went to my in-laws' house. "Flora, you're late. Is this the car for today? You should have rented a bigger one," my mother-in-law said. "Well, it's better than your tiny car, at least," I replied. "The car we usually use is one I bought myself, even for commuting to work. I assumed I'd be its main user since I paid for it. We don't often travel out of town, so I thought a small car would be enough. Plus, I loved its interior design and color, so I bought it. My husband would use it without asking and show his parents around in it. My mother-in-law criticized the car's size and acted like I could only afford a small car. I suggested we use my father-in-law's car for the trip, but he didn't want others driving it and didn't want to do all the driving himself. So we rented a car, but I wasn't consulted about this. I found out that I'd have to pick up the rental car and drive it while they sat comfortably in the back seat. It made me want to tell them to arrange their own transportation. I was really tired. In the end, even though my husband said he'd help with the driving, he slept through the entire trip. My father-in-law refused to drive unless it was his car, leaving me to drive the whole way while my husband napped in the passenger seat. My father-in-law constantly criticized my driving, giving me suggestions too late or questioning my decisions at traffic lights. It was just added stress. My mother-in-law joined in, criticizing my driving too. I found it annoying to be critiqued by someone who couldn't drive herself, especially since my father-in-law had been in many accidents and should have given up his license. My mother-in-law insisted he was just unlucky and a good driver. I didn't want him to drive me around anyway. I didn't mind driving, but I wished he would stop interfering. When we arrived at the resort, my husband finally woke up, tired from a day in the car. We followed my in-laws' suggestion to relax at the hotel instead of doing any activities outside. I enjoyed the chance to unwind, swimming in the pool and exploring the hotel grounds. It was a nice way to spend the day after a delicious dinner and a relaxing spa visit. I returned to our room to find my husband already asleep. I wasn't sure what my in-laws were doing next door, but they were probably asleep too. I went to bed, and when I woke up to the fresh morning air, my husband was still asleep. With some time before breakfast, I decided to take a walk. But when I returned, I found an unbelievable sight. My husband was gone, and his things were missing too. I frantically searched the room and tried to contact my in-laws next door, but there was no answer. At the front desk, I learned they had already eaten breakfast an hour earlier than I was told. It seemed they had left me behind. I also had to pay for the hotel checkout by myself. Was my mother-in-law's offer to pay for our stay just a trick? With no other choice, I paid for both rooms and left the hotel, only to find there was no car waiting for me. While I was thinking about what to do next, my phone rang. It was my mother-in-law. Where are you now?" I asked, confused about the situation. My mother-in-law chuckled in response, "Just enjoying some quality family time since we're on vacation." "I see, but why didn't you all just leave together from the beginning instead of leaving me behind?" I couldn't help but ask. "Wow, Flora, you did express interest in joining us, didn't you?" "That's why we decided to bring you along," she replied casually. I remembered mentioning that I wanted to visit this resort while watching TV with my husband. Was that what he remembered? Normally, it would be sweet if he remembered my casual comments, but this time it felt like he used it to annoy me. Besides, I was the one who did most of the driving to get here. Why should I be reminded that I was brought here by my mother-in-law, who neither drove nor contributed any money? Beyond anger, all I could do was sigh. "Fine then, let's go sightseeing as a family and head home afterward," I suggested. "You can do some sightseeing too, Flora, and then come back. We're not sure how you'll get back, but you're good at marathons, aren't you? Just run back." My mother-in-law taunted, her laughter making me more frustrated. "If Steve is driving, put me on speakerphone so he can hear me," I demanded, my anger boiling over. As soon as I made the request, it seemed my mother-in-law transferred the call, and my husband's voice came on the line. "Good morning, you were eager to come here, weren't you? Take it easy today, but remember we have laundry from the trip to tackle. Make sure it's washed by tomorrow morning," he said cheerfully. But any warmth I once felt for him had disappeared. "Do your own laundry," I replied sharply. "Hey, that's not a nice way to speak. As the breadwinner, I'm advising you to relax today. You should be thanking me," he replied. "Oh, the breadwinner? Don't worry, this will be the last time we see each other since you've mostly just seen me when you're asleep," I said, making it clear that I was serious. "What do you mean?" he asked, clearly puzzled. "We need to head back home today. There's laundry and house cleaning waiting for us," my husband declared. "Yeah, that's exactly why I'm not going back," I responded firmly. "What do you mean?" His voice quivered with uncertainty. "I'm filing for divorce. Remember 6 months ago when you told me you met your soulmate, your childhood friend, and you were planning to marry her? The one who moved back to your hometown after her divorce?" I reminded him, feeling the surge of emotion. About 6 months ago, I sensed something was wrong and confronted my husband. He confessed he had reconnected with his childhood friend and believed she was his true love. He wanted to divorce me and marry her to support her and her child as a single mother. He even gave me pre-filled divorce papers, but I couldn't bring myself to end our marriage. We didn't speak for days until he realized he needed my help with household chores. Eventually, he asked me to forget what he said, but I couldn't, so I started gathering evidence of his cheating. I wondered if Steve had planned this trip to try to win me over. This conversation happened about 3 months ago, shortly after I quit my job. As I shared my thoughts, I could hear the surprise in my in-laws' voices on the other end of the speakerphone. It seemed this was the first time they were hearing about their son's resignation. "I remember when you said you were leaving your job. I was worried about you finding a new one and disagreed with your reasons, didn't I?" I continued, recalling the exchange. "You were confident and assured me you'd find a new job quickly. Yet here we are, and you've only managed to secure a part-time position. I can't help but wonder when you'll find something more stable." As Steve remained silent while driving, I took the chance to share my thoughts. "I've been imagining you as a dog to cope with the stress, but then I realized I might as well get a real one," I said firmly. "So I'll be filing the divorce papers. Enjoy your family vacation." My in-laws were shocked, and my husband tried to say something, but I hung up the call without a second thought. I decided to enjoy sightseeing before heading home, and I explained the situation to my son over the phone. His response was simple. "I told you so. While his reaction was expected, it felt a bit lighter than I anticipated, given that he already knew what was going on. When I returned from the trip, I didn't go back home. Instead, I put my sons and my belongings in a self-storage unit, just in case. With only the essentials, I went to a real estate agency. The sales representative, who I had become friendly with and shared drinks with a few times, greeted me warmly. She was from my generation, so she was easy to talk to. Over drinks, I had told her about my husband and in-laws and asked her to let me know if any properties became available. That day, I signed a contract for my own place. Having a new home made me feel relieved, and I went to the city hall to submit the divorce papers, which went through without any problems. Finally, I returned the many calls my ex-husband had made. "Hello," I began, keeping my voice steady. "The divorce papers have been accepted. We are now officially strangers." My husband's panicked voice came through the phone. "Are you serious about the divorce?" I ended things with her. "It's just you now. You didn't like me looking at other women, right? Well, now I'm only focused on you. Please come back without any worries." But his words only made me feel disgusted. "What are you talking about? I never tried to please you in the first place. And you didn't end things with her, did you? You were dumped because you couldn't find a job and had no money, right?" It turned out my husband's mistress was acquainted with the sales representative who helped me find my new place. What a small world. She had listened to my husband's mistress's complaints about him, saying she was his current girlfriend. Apparently, after he quit his job and started working part-time, she saw no reason to stay with him and ended things. But a fling is just a fling. I'll definitely be seeking compensation. That's correct. Even though they split up now, he still cheated, and there's evidence. Compensation. I already told you, we broke up. It's just you now. I could only let out a sigh. "So, you're saying that now you're single, you're considering another affair. I don't care what you do, but I'm done being taken advantage of. You didn't even notice your things were missing from the house because you didn't care, did you? I'm not coming back, so throw away whatever you don't need." With that, I ended the call. Even after this, my ex-husband kept calling me, and my former in-laws reached out too. But I have no intention of going back to that house. My ex-husband still hasn't found a job, can't afford the rent, and has moved back in with his parents. Meanwhile, my ex-father-in-law continues to drive recklessly and recently crashed into a neighbor's fence with my ex-mother-in-law in the car. Thankfully, no one was injured, but they didn't have property insurance and had to borrow money to cover the repair costs. All of this was detailed in an email my ex-husband kept sending me. I find his misfortune somewhat amusing. While I don't respond, I haven't blocked his emails either, quietly enjoying the spectacle. After moving to a pet-friendly property, I got a small dog and found that I enjoyed caring for a pet more than I did for people. My son, worried about me being alone, has started visiting on weekends, a change from only coming during long holidays. Each day now feels fulfilling. Maybe this weekend I'll visit that resort town again for the first time in a while. Hi, I'm Emily, and I just turned 29. Years ago, I made the mistake of marrying a man with lots of problems, thinking love would fix everything. I believed I could show him how valuable he was, but I was wrong. Love is strong, but it can't make someone love themselves. I'll call my ex Joseph. He was obsessed with making his parents happy. It wasn't just a normal desire to please them. It was an overwhelming need for their approval that influenced everything he did. Joseph's parents, who I'll call Mr. and Mrs. Ellis, didn't really care about his life, which made him desperate for their attention. It was sad to watch, and I quickly realized I couldn't fill the emotional void left by his parents. To make things worse, Joseph had a terrible habit of spending our savings on things his parents wanted. He bought them extravagant gifts, vacations, and other unnecessary stuff. Our money seemed to flow directly to Mr. and Mrs. Ellis, and their lack of appreciation made it even more frustrating for me. This reckless spending was a constant source of arguments between us. It felt like I was competing with his parents for his attention, which drained our marriage. Despite all the problems and constant arguments, I still cared about Joseph. I hoped he could free himself from his parents' unrealistic expectations and find happiness within himself. But it became clear that my love wasn't enough to help him escape their negative influence. Things took an even sharper turn one day. Joseph came to me looking serious and said he had something important to tell me. After all the ups and downs we've been through, I prepared myself for the worst, not knowing the bombshell he was about to drop. As he started talking, I had a gut feeling this would lead to our biggest argument yet. "Emily, there's something important I need to talk about," he said seriously. "What's going on?" I asked, already bracing myself for bad news. "It's about my parents. They're retiring soon, and I want to surprise them with a luxury vacation." "It's going to cost a lot," he said, looking both excited and nervous. That sounds nice as long as the money comes from your own savings. I really don't want to use our joint savings again, I said, hoping to avoid another fight about money. I don't have enough to pay for it myself. I was hoping we could use some of our savings, Joseph admitted, looking hopeful but worried. Joseph, if it's more than we can afford, maybe we should rethink this expense, I suggested gently, trying to bring him back to reality. But he got upset. You just don't understand, Emily. I love my parents and wanted to do something special for them. Love isn't about counting every penny. It's about grand gestures, he argued passionately. I argued, but love is also about being there for each other and making sacrifices together, not at the expense of our financial stability. This trip might be important to them, but we need to think about our future too. Joseph was determined. I have to do this for them. I thought you, of all people, would understand. They're everything to me. And you're everything to me, Joseph, but we have to be practical. We can't just use up all our savings on one trip. I tried to find a compromise, but he accused me of being selfish and not seeing the importance of his gesture. It's not about being selfish, it's about being sensible and planning for the future, I explained, wondering just how much he planned to spend. When he said he needed all of our savings, my heart sank. All of our savings, Joseph, that's just reckless, I said, shocked by his request. You're being heartless, he shot back, convinced I couldn't understand his desire to make his parents happy. No, Joseph, I'm being realistic. We can't afford to spend $85,000 on a whim, I said, my patience running out. His casual mention of getting the money back later only added to my frustration. Really, Joseph? That's not how this works, I replied, my disbelief obvious. We were at a standstill. Our views on love, responsibility, and money were completely different. The argument got louder and more intense. Suddenly, things were being thrown and breaking as if to emphasize our anger. In the midst of this chaos, Joseph declared that if I couldn't support him, he wanted a divorce. He probably expected me to panic and try to save our marriage. But I didn't. Instead, I gathered all my calm and resolve and simply said, "Okay, Joseph, if that's truly what you want." The shock on his face was clear. He had expected tears and begging, but what he got was my firm stance. I was done indulging his fantasies. If he wanted to waste his future chasing unrealistic dreams, he could do it without me. I didn't hold back. I told him everything. I made it clear that his endless quest for his parents' approval was pointless, like trying to stay dry in a storm with just an umbrella. He tried to argue, but I stopped him with a simple raise of my hand. I declared that I was done fighting for a love trapped by unrealistic expectations and a constant need for validation. Go ahead, spend all your money trying to win over people who barely notice you, I told him, firm in my decision to end the cycle of disappointments and broken promises. And with that, the harsh truth hit him. He finally realized how bad things had gotten. Our marriage had turned into a battlefield, and it was time to raise the white flag and find peace separately. A month has passed since the divorce was finalized, and I can honestly say the feeling of freedom is incredible. Gone are the days of endless arguments about money or seeking approval that was never ours to gain. Now I'm breathing easier, free from the heavy burden of his doubts that once darkened my days. Each new day seems a little brighter. True, Joseph has tried to sneak back into my life, pretending to be concerned and asking about my well-being, but I saw through his act. I wasn't going to fall for his tricks again. As the saying goes, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. I firmly turned away from Joseph's attempts to rekindle anything we once had. I had realized I'd invested too much in trying to fix someone who didn't want to change. It was time to focus on my own growth and happiness. Rebuilding wasn't easy, let me be clear. Dividing our shared assets and adjusting to a new financial reality took patience and resilience. I was used to a certain way of living, but adapting wasn't new to me. I embraced the hard work needed to rebuild my life, discovering a strength and independence I didn't know I had. Reconnecting with old friends, getting back into hobbies I'd neglected, and finding new interests made the world feel big and full of possibilities. I was eager to make the most of this fresh start. Sure, there were moments of self-doubt and loneliness, and adjusting to a new budget was challenging. The wounds from a failed marriage don't heal overnight, but with each passing day, I found comfort in the fact that I was no longer sacrificing my happiness for someone else's insecurities. The ease with which I moved forward might have been a sign that I had been holding on to a lost cause for too long. It amazed me how much I could accomplish once free from that burden. So here I was, a month later, still adjusting but flourishing all the same. Joseph's constant messaging had taken a new turn. He was now claiming to be in danger and insisting on a meeting. Tired of his relentless attempts to contact me, I decided it was time to confront the situation. In the middle of his ongoing messages, I called him. "Joseph, we've been through this. We're divorced. It's time for us to move on," I said firmly. Emily, please. I just need a moment to explain. I'm in serious trouble, and you're the only one I can turn to for help, he begged. Maybe it was the long absence of his voice, or perhaps he truly sounded scared, but against my better judgment, I agreed to meet. Fine, but we're not meeting at my place. Let's go to that cafe we used to go to. No tricks, understood, I said. Thank you, Emily. I promise I just need someone to listen. You're the only one who understands me, he replied, sounding relieved. I know what you're thinking. Emily, why would you agree to meet Joseph after everything? Believe me, I questioned my own decision. Yet sometimes there's a part of us that gives in to a mix of curiosity and a lingering shred of concern, no matter how strong we are. I couldn't ignore his plea. Divorced or not, part of me still cared. So there we sat, opposite each other in the cozy cafe, surrounded by the comforting aroma of coffee. But not even the pleasant smell could ease the tension between us. Watching Joseph, with anxiety on his face and his attempts to tug at my heartstrings with those sad eyes, was almost amusing. This time, however, I wasn't swayed. Leaning back, I stayed calm and composed, ready to listen but firmly in control. I intended to steer this conversation on my terms. Okay, Joseph, you got my attention for now. What's this danger you're supposedly in? And just so you know, I'm not here to save you. I'm done cleaning up your messes, I said, keeping my tone firm yet open. Joseph sighed, deeply, his face a mix of regret and desperation that was almost pitiful to see. But I steeled myself against any emotional manipulation. I know I've made mistakes before, Emily, but this situation is different. I've gotten involved with some seriously bad people. I owe them a lot of money and they're not known for their patience, he confessed. I raised an eyebrow, skeptical of his dramatic story. Really, Joseph? Dangerous people? Are we revisiting the tale of your imaginary friends who seem to attract trouble? I couldn't hide my disbelief. Joseph's expression shifted to one of hurt and frustration, evidently hoping for a more sympathetic ear. No, Emily, this isn't made up. I'm in deep trouble, and coming to you was my last resort, he insisted, his voice laced with desperation. So let me guess, you spiraled after our divorce and now you're in debt? Was it that trip you mentioned? I couldn't keep my voice down, drawing curious glances from other cafe patrons. I shot them an apologetic look, trying to regain my composure. Look, I got caught up in something foolish, I admit, but now I'm in a mess that's bigger than I can handle alone, Joseph admitted, his gaze pleading. My frustration was close to boiling over. How could he waltz back into my life with yet another crisis? Yet, underneath the anger, I couldn't completely ignore the remaining shred of empathy for him. How much are you in for? I asked, bracing myself. $145,000, Joseph responded sheepishly. $145,000? Joseph, are you out of your mind? The cafe's patrons turned their heads, their stares sharp as knives. This time, I didn't bother to offer an apology for my outburst. If they were in my shoes, hearing what I was hearing, they'd likely react the same way. Emily, please, I'm begging you. I've got nowhere else to turn. I know I've made a mess of things, but you're the one person who really believed in me, Joseph pleaded, his eyes shining with a sincerity that reminded me of the man I once loved. But those days were long gone, and my priority now was self-preservation, even if it meant walking away from him. Don't pull at my heartstrings, Joseph. It's way too late for that. When you said you needed help, I thought you meant $12,000, not $145,000. You've completely lost it, I responded, my voice a mix of disbelief and indignation. Overwhelmed, Joseph began to cry, oblivious to the uncomfortable glances from others. Joseph, calm down. This isn't the place for a scene. What's going to happen if you don't pay this back? I asked, trying to grasp the full extent of his predicament. They're threatening to harm me, Emily. I'm not joking. This is really bad, he managed between sobs. His words hung heavy in the air, leaving me torn between my lingering concern for his well-being and the need to protect myself from getting dragged back into his chaos. Seeing how serious things were for him, I softened my approach. All right, Joseph, start from the beginning and tell me everything, I said gently. He explained how he had tried to pay for an expensive trip for his parents. He borrowed money from a friend who let him down, leaving him with a lot of debt. As he told his story, I felt a mix of frustration at his poor choices and some reluctant amusement at how things turned out. So you borrowed money from risky people to impress your parents who hadn't even noticed your efforts. Is that what happened? I asked, trying to understand. Joseph's face dropped and tears rolled down his cheeks as he admitted the harsh truth. Yes, ever since they went on that trip, it's like I don't matter to them, he said, sounding very sorry. Even though I was frustrated, I felt a bit of sympathy for him. It was a tough lesson for Joseph, and seeing him so regretful made me feel a bit compassionate. You've really gotten yourself into a tough spot, I said. Joseph, I know you don't want to hear I told you so, but you did create this mess yourself. I warned you it wasn't a good idea, and now you chose to leave me over it, and here you are, struggling. You put everything into trying to make your parents happy, but all you got in return was silence. It's a hard lesson, but it's one you needed to learn, I said, feeling a mix of concern and resignation. This was a hard truth for both of us. Joseph had based his self-worth on people who couldn't appreciate his sacrifices, and I had to accept that I couldn't protect him from his own choices anymore. I hoped that facing these tough consequences would show him that I had always been on his side. But his need for parental approval was his downfall. As we sat in silence, the weight of our past, filled with broken promises and dreams, was heavy. I realized it was time to let go completely. No more second chances, no more trying to fix what was beyond repair. Joseph needed to face the results of his actions alone, and I needed to move on and find my own happiness. I hope you find a way out of this, Joseph, I said, my voice firm with finality. You're not going to help? Joseph asked, looking surprised. No, I'm not, I replied. Joseph, I can't help you. Why not? He asked. Because I don't have the money to bail you out, and even if I did, taking on a huge loan that I'd be paying off for years isn't an option. I can't afford to be as reckless as you've been, I explained firmly. Come on, Emily, please. I'm begging you, he said, his desperation clear. Joseph, expecting me to fix this for you, especially with how you're acting, isn't realistic, I said, my patience wearing thin. Yeah, I did expect that. You're my ex-wife, not my enemy, he replied, still holding on to hope. But it was clear our lives had gone in different directions. My focus now was on finding my own peace and happiness, separate from the chaos we once shared. And that's the problem, Joseph. You expect me to always be there to clean up your mess because that's what I used to do. I was your wife, so helping you out of trouble was something I did naturally. But I can't and shouldn't keep doing that. It's not my responsibility anymore. After everything, I don't owe you anything, especially considering how our money was wasted on your ungrateful and toxic parents. But I love them, Joseph said, but I love myself too. And loving myself means doing what's best for me, including taking care of my own well-being, I said. Joseph looked down, realizing that he wasn't going to get the help he wanted from me. Since it seems like you're out of options, here's one piece of advice. Leave. Move somewhere far away where they can't find you. If you can't do that, I'm not sure what else you expect from me. He sat there in silence, clearly frustrated by my refusal to help him this time. It's time for us to go our separate ways, Joseph. I can't keep being dragged back into your problems. We both need to find our own peace, I said, hoping he would understand. If you really cared about me, you'd help, he said, anger in his voice. Goodbye, Joseph. I'm changing my number, I said firmly as I stood up to leave. As I walked away, Joseph stayed seated, his face showing a mix of emotions. It was a tough but necessary step for me to take for my own happiness and self-respect. So, you already have the divorce papers ready? Are you trying to scare me? You know I'm ready for this at any time. You better calm down and think about what you just said. With that, my husband Jackson got up and went into his room. My name is Kama, and I'm a 28-year-old office worker. I got married a year ago to a man named Jackson. We met on a blind date, and after dating for a year and a half, he proposed to me. Although I thought we got married a bit too soon, I'd always wanted to be married and have children before turning 30, so I accepted his proposal. However, I later realized I should have been more cautious. The first surprise came when Jackson changed his job as soon as we got married. Out of the blue, he said he was changing jobs. Why all of a sudden? I asked him, he replied, because I can't show my full potential there. I was taken aback, especially when he told me he had already submitted his resignation and would leave at the end of the month. He managed to get a new job, but the salary was lower than his previous one. I thought it was fine since I was also working, but then Jackson started asking me to quit my job. I would have been okay with quitting if his income could support us both. However, as I mentioned, he had just changed jobs and his salary was now lower. Jackson insisted that his salary would increase soon, but we had no idea when that would be. If I quit my job now, we wouldn't be able to save any money and would struggle to cover expenses like rent and car payments. In short, we couldn't manage on Jackson's salary alone. I told Jackson, I won't quit my job until your salary goes up. Jackson seemed to agree, but he kept asking me to quit. Every time I gave him the same answer. Now we've been married for a year and Jackson's salary still hasn't increased. He keeps asking, when are you going to quit? I'm tempted to sarcastically say, now, and then tell him I'm just kidding because I can't quit yet. If he wants me to quit so badly, he should earn more money. I feel like he should focus on his work instead of persistently asking me to quit. I wondered why Jackson wants me to quit my job so badly, and I finally figured it out. It seems Jackson wants me to take care of his mother, Helen. Whenever we visited my in-laws' house, Jackson would say to Helen, "I just want to make things easier for you, Mom." Helen would graciously thank him, and then Jackson would add, "But we're both working," giving me a meaningful look. It was as if he was subtly pushing me to quit my job. Jackson claims his mother needs assistance, but Helen isn't sick or in need of care. She's healthy and quite active. In fact, she earns enough from her part-time job to support her hobbies, social outings, and live a fulfilling life. Realistically, she doesn't require my help at all. If I were in Helen's shoes, I'd feel disheartened to be seen as needing care when I'm perfectly capable. But Jackson continues to insist that I take care of Helen. "Oh, if only one of us were home during the day, we could go check on Mom every day," Jackson suddenly voiced his thoughts. It seemed he wanted me to visit my in-laws' house daily, and hearing this was exhausting. I persisted in questioning my husband. "Helen is perfectly healthy, so what exactly do you expect me to do?" Jackson responded matter-of-factly, "There are plenty of things you could do. You could help with housework or run errands. There's a lot to assist her with." "But Helen works part-time and spends time with her friends during the day, so she's not home much, right?" I countered. "Even if Mom isn't home, you could still handle the housework, couldn't you?" Jackson's words left me baffled. What is he saying? Am I supposed to be her maid? I thought to myself. Jackson seems to be very concerned about appearances, especially in front of his parents. If he's so determined to care for them, he should handle the household chores himself. I wasn't interested in indulging Jackson's pride, so I didn't quit my job and avoided visiting my in-laws on my days off. However, I did make sure to visit them during holidays like New Year's. Thinking back, Jackson often assigned me tasks whenever we visited my in-laws together. He'd ask me to clean up, assist his mom, check if anything was needed from the store, and so on. But I never acted on these requests. When he asked me to go to the store, I'd respond with, "Don't you know more about this area than I do?" He'd then say, "It wouldn't make sense if I did it." I didn't really understand his reasoning. It seemed like he just wanted to control me and feel good about taking care of his parents, didn't it? Over time, that's how I started to view Jackson. Could it be that he's more concerned with appearances than genuinely caring for me? When I boldly asked him, "Why don't you pitch in or quit your job to care for your own mother?" he appeared extremely uncomfortable and had a disgusted expression on his face. "That's not something I'm supposed to do. I'm giving you these instructions so that my mom will think that you are a considerate, useful wife. I hope you realize how kind I am to you," he said. In other words, he wants to dump all the difficult tasks on his wife and show off how good he is as if it's something remarkable. Well, I'm not his servant or slave, and I don't deserve to be treated disrespectfully in front of my in-laws. If Jackson continues making unreasonable demands, I won't stay silent. I'll stand up for myself. But despite talking to him, Jackson hasn't changed. He still asks, "Are you going to quit your job?" And whenever we visit my in-laws, he orders me around just like before. I had enough and decided it was time to discuss it with him seriously. "I think we need to talk about our future," I said. "What are you even trying to say?" Jackson replied, sounding annoyed. "I'm honestly fed up. I'm tired of you constantly asking me when I'll quit my job and exhausted from you pressuring me to take care of Helen," I explained. "Why are you fed up with that? You're my wife and it's your duty to care for your husband's parents," Jackson said. "Don't you think that's a huge responsibility for me? Shouldn't you, as their biological child, be responsible for helping with the housework and taking care of your own parents in the first place?" I asked. "No way, it's the wife's duty to do it. Are you the kind of person who doesn't care about family?" "I'm really disappointed to hear you say that," Jackson responded. "Then let me ask you this, how have you been taking care of my parents?" "If I asked you to care for my parents, would you do it then?" I questioned. Jackson stared at me blankly. "What are you saying? Why should a husband take care of his wife's parents? So does that mean you won't take care of my parents now or ever?" I pressed. "The husband's parents and wife's parents are completely different," Jackson replied. "What difference does that make, anyway? I don't get it," I said, feeling frustrated. "I didn't realize you were so clueless. It's like talking to my old boss," I continued. "What are you saying?" Jackson asked, confused. "I'm saying the husband's parents should come first. You should take care of your wife's parents," I clarified. "What?" I exclaimed. "So you only prioritize your own blood-related family? I'm so disappointed in you. I won't be visiting your parents anymore." "Ha, why would you do that? Enough is enough. I'm the one who wants you to stop this nonsense," I retorted. "No way, how dare you talk back like that? My mom is right," Jackson shot back. "Ha, Mom was talking about you. She said you're a badly behaved wife. That's why she gave me this." With that, Jackson pulled out a piece of paper from his bag. It was divorce papers. "What? You already had divorce papers ready?" I was shocked, but Jackson seemed strangely proud. See? I scared you, didn't I? I'm prepared for this anytime, so think about what you just said, Jackson declared smugly before leaving for his room. Unbelievable. Why is Jackson so selfish? That look of triumph on his face. It's clear the divorce papers are a threat to make me obey him. The fact that Helen was involved made me even more suspicious. Jackson is acting like a puppet for his mom, trying to control me while following her orders. It's ridiculous. I won't let Jackson have his way. How can he not see our marriage is in trouble when he acts like this? His lack of understanding just annoys me more. Jackson had already completed the divorce papers and handed them to me with witnesses, including Helen and his friends. This meant I could sign and file them whenever I chose. The next day, after Jackson went to work, I filled out the divorce papers and submitted them to the city office. As a precaution, I also filed a notice of non-acceptance of the marriage certificate. I called my parents and explained the situation, knowing Jackson might threaten to file the marriage certificate on his own if he found out. My parents were shocked that I had already prepared the divorce papers but fully supported my decision. Outraged by Jackson's behavior, they offered to help me move my belongings immediately. Taking a leave from work, I had my parents come over and relocate all my things to their house while Jackson was away. I decided to stay with my parents for a while. It was the first time in a long time that I felt truly comfortable and at ease in their home. Reflecting back, Jackson never did his share of housework. I was the one cooking dinner after long work days and handling all the cleaning and laundry on my days off. On top of that, he expected me to care for his parents, which was impossible. That night, Jackson called me, probably just back from work. Hello? Hey, where are you right now? I'm at my parents' house. Oh, why would you go back there without my permission? And where's all your stuff? Don't tell me you're staying the night. I almost laughed. How could he think I was staying when I had taken most of my belongings with me? It showed his selfishness to even suggest that I move out of the house. I'm not coming back, I said firmly. What are you talking about? Come back here and make me some food. Make it yourself, I replied, ending the call. I couldn't discuss divorce with him if he continued to behave this way. I decided to wait for him to come to my parents' house and blocked his number. A week later, Jackson showed up at my parents' house, accompanied by his parents. They all wore serious expressions. I led them into the living room, and we faced each other, 3 against 3. How could you do this? How could you leave without my permission? Jackson demanded. Well, you were treating me like a housekeeper. All I asked you to do was take care of your family, I countered. That's not true. What kind of wife are you if you don't take care of Jackson? Helen shot me a fierce glare. My father began to tremble with anger, but I interjected. Jackson told me to quit my job and care for Helen, saying it was my duty as his wife. Yet, when it comes to my family, he expects me to handle everything alone. Ultimately, Jackson wants obedience and uses me to care for his parents while taking credit for it. That's why he prioritizes his parents over mine. Have you heard Jackson say these things? Helen continued to glare, but Carter looked confused, indicating he hadn't heard this before. Let's clear the air, Jackson said suddenly, bringing up the divorce papers and claiming it was Helen's idea. Why would you suggest that? Carter asked, clearly surprised. Oh no, it's because Camilla has an attitude problem, Helen stammered. And did you really say that Camilla's parents aren't a priority? I pressed. Well, it's only natural that your own parents come first, Helen retorted defensively. Don't be absurd. I came here to support you after hearing about the unfair treatment Camilla endured, but now it seems you're the one at fault. Don't hide behind your parents' authority to get your way, Carter said, making Jackson visibly shrink in his seat. Carter then apologized to me and my parents. I'm truly sorry for the trouble caused by my foolish son. I will have a serious talk with him. Carter, you're not to blame at all, so please don't apologize, I replied. Thank you for your kind words, but there's something else I need to say. Turning to Jackson, who was now nervous, I said, the divorce papers you gave me, I've already filed them. We're no longer married. Jackson and Helen both turned pale. Why did you file them without my permission? Jackson demanded, shocked. You told me I could file them whenever I wanted. Besides, you had already filled out your part and had Helen sign as a witness, I calmly explained. Oh, that was, Jackson stammered, clearly at a loss for words. Carter, furious, intervened. Jackson, you used divorce as a threat. He slapped Jackson across the face. Helen was visibly shaken by the confrontation. I apologize deeply that you had to witness this. You're right to divorce this fool. On behalf of Jackson, I'm truly sorry for ruining your marriage, Carter said, grasping Jackson by the collar and demanding apologies from both Jackson and Helen before escorting them out of the house. Later, I thanked Carter for his intervention. He ensured that all of Jackson's assets and property were transferred to me without any hassle. Despite my higher income and managing our household, it was a relief to secure everything from our marriage. I later learned that Carter had divorced Helen, clearly disgusted with her actions. The other day, I ran into a colleague from Jackson's old workplace who shared some surprising news. Jackson wasn't performing well at his job and often received harsh criticism from his boss. In defiance, Jackson resigned and changed jobs. This only added to my frustration with him. Instead of taking responsibility for his shortcomings, he blamed others, which likely contributed to his lower pay at the new job. I'm relieved to have left him. I've rented a cozy apartment and enjoy living independently. Work is going smoothly, and I even received a recent raise. Right now, I'm not interested in relationships and prefer focusing on my career. Jackson always cared more about appearances than actual abilities. He maintained a facade at home but failed to improve professionally. Sadly, many husbands use divorce threats as leverage, thinking they're powerful, but it's a big mistake. I hope they realize their folly and find happiness alone. Meanwhile, I'm grateful to have moved on from Jackson and look forward to meeting someone special in the future.